Welcome everyone to another episode of Tutorial Tuesday. It is week 38, 2019. I'm glad that you're along with us. We have a ton of questions on tap and some really in-depth questions as well, so I want to get right into those. So I'm just going to make one announcement. I want to send a big shout out and a big thank you to JW Custom Hats for making the hat that I'm wearing today. Absolutely love it. Thank you, Raymond. I really appreciate you, friend. Let's get right into your questions. What a great question here. I would say this. I want my images to always be an expression of who I am as an artist and also express, more importantly, what my client is looking for, whether that be out with a family. So when I'm out with a family, I want to be able to represent who they are and what they look like. And for a commercial client, I also want to do the same thing. I want to represent their brand and I want to be able to visually communicate what they're looking for. We have so many tools available to us today to make ourselves better photographers, to better understand this medium of photography and to better understand how to visually communicate. My thoughts specifically on AV are understand how your camera develops an image by putting your camera into AV, selecting an aperture, and seeing what the camera comes up with for a shutter speed, and then dial. So use AV to understand how your camera comes up with the shutter speed based on a certain exposure and the aperture value that you dial in. That's one good way of understanding the overall exposure triangle. Now, all of that said about the creative modes like AV and TV, where TV represents shutter speed, I would add that this is not a creative exposure. A creative exposure is an authentic expression of your artistic vision. Now for me personally, sometimes I do flip over to AV, and that's to get a shutter speed based on a certain exposure that I'm looking for. Then I dial that in manually and usually underexposed by about a stop. Thank you for your compliment. I certainly appreciate that. I've been doing this and my wife and I have been self-employed for over a decade now, so thank you very much. Past the technical challenges of choosing a portfolio for a particular client, meaning the technical side of it, meaning images must be sharp, images must be compelling, images must have impact. So past those fundamental things, what I want to be able to do is visually communicate branding to that particular client. So I will choose images that I feel represent that brand. Well, first and foremost, I don't think that mirrorless is a bandwagon to hop on or off of. In fact, all you have to do is look at Canon or Nikon's financial statements, either their quarterly or their annual, to see that impact. For me personally, when it's time to upgrade my second body, which currently is a 5D Mark III, I'll be upgrading to a mirrorless camera. Now, what I like to see is depth in the market, meaning I like to see mirrorless cameras on the market for at least 5 years. Just in general, I'm not one of those people that go out and early adopt new technology. I like to see those bugs worked out prior to me investing my money into those products. So thank you for the question. Hey Aaron, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate that. Go check out JW Custom Hats. Great question. I'll be building out in 2020 a free library of beginner tutorials that include camera operation, composition, exposure, and things like that. Now there's a ton of resources on the internet, and let me point you to a few. The first resource I would give you is myself. I offer one-on-one private mentoring. We meet online, I record the meetings, and you can go back to those and reference what you learned. Anything from portfolio reviews to camera operation to exposure and composition. Here are the 3 resources that are online that you can go check out, and each one has a nice library of material that you can access on YouTube or directly on their site. They are Creative Live, F-Stoppers, and Flern. Hey Holly, a couple things come to mind when I look at upgrading. Number one, the useful life of the shutter. So the 5D Mark III has a rating of 150,000 actuations on it, and I would be looking to upgrade if I went beyond that. The second thing is whether or not it gets busted out in the field, at which time I would invoke my business owner's policy and I would upgrade my camera at that point. So thanks for the question. Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't use Photoshop to export my social media images. Everything that gets exported from me goes through Lightroom, and I'll go ahead and post the settings that I use for that. Hope they help you. Hey, Brianna, thanks for the question. So what she wants to know is it worth her time if she doesn't have the money to buy the 16 to 35 f2.8, rather invest into the 17 to 40 f4? Now, while that 17 to 40 is a good lens, you lose a whole stop of light. And for you, maybe that's not important, but as a working professional, I need the fastest glass out there just to cover my bases on everything I do, especially if I'm shooting a wedding indoors. What I would recommend, and this is out of my own experience, is when there's a lens that I do want and I've settled for something else, I bought an alternative, I usually end up being disappointed, especially if I rent that lens from a rental house like Lens Rental or Borrow Lenses or something like that. So my recommendation is if you don't need it for everyday use, then buy that 17 to 40. But if you want that 16 to 35, consider buying it used from my friends over at KEH. Hope that helps you. Sure, recommendations for fast action sports. You want the fastest glass that you can get, because sometimes you're not going to be in the best lighting conditions, especially if you're considering an indoor arena like rodeo sometimes is. In that case, my recommendation would be to look at the 70 to 200 f2.8 with the image stabilizer on it. And again, check out KEH for used deals to be more budget friendly here. Now, another lens that I would recommend for fast action sports would be the 300 millimeter prime lens. Take a look at that over on KEH as well. So the 300 millimeter prime and the 70 to 200 f2.8.